Welcome to the Becoming Body Smart podcast, where we unlock the secrets of sustainable health and fitness and help you master your health habits. If you're tired of quick fixes, generic blueprints, and chasing short-term results, you're in the right place. It's time to become Body Smart.
We are excited to bring you another episode of The Call. And let's see. So today's topic, what we want to talk about, is actually lessons Marc learned from his recent trip. So he went to Oregon to learn from some other gurus and learn from their perspective and things like that. And so I asked him if he wouldn't prepare some thoughts and share some of the knowledge that he gained there. So I'll chime in and everything, but Marc kind of wrote down some of the key bullet points of the things that he learned there. And so this is some of the latest, greatest information from researchers and other people that we want to share some of the highlights with you. So Marc, take it away and I'll chime in.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So the first 3 points that I'm going to talk about are really all related. But the first one is this idea of when we're exercising and when we're kind of measuring exercise, there's a big difference often between what we did, what we can do, and what we think we can do. And so basically it means a lot of the time, so sometimes we think we have way more gas in the tank than we do. And then other times that shows up as us actually having more gas in the tank than we think we do. Did I say the same thing there? I'm not sure if I did. Anyway, so we sometimes over or underestimate how much we can actually do, right? And it's domain specific, right? So a lot of times, we've talked in the past about our self-selected pace during running, right? That ends up being more more intense than we anticipate, right? It draws down our body's energy more quickly. And then other times, right, it may be weightlifting, especially for people who aren't familiar with weightlifting. Like, oh man, yeah, I probably just got I probably only have 1 rep in the tank, right? But if you push them, we'll do another rep. We'll do another rep. We'll do another rep, right? Oh, well, actually, I had 6 more in the tank, right? And so our perception of what we can do doesn't always match up with what we're actually capable of. And so being aware of that, there's some strategies for kind of anchoring where we're at, so we have a better idea of how much we can or can't do. And so this goes into the idea of especially in muscle, when is training to failure appropriate, right? So you'll see a lot of stuff out there about, oh yeah, you got to train to failure, you got to do this or that, right? All these different strategies, and kind of what's the rationale behind that, and why can it be useful. And so in the context of this, what you can do versus what you think you can do, going to muscular failure can be a really great way to anchor that rating of perceived exertion, or like we put in the workouts, how many reps in reserve do you have? So a lot of the workouts that we program will say, do it with 3 repetitions in reserve, or do it with 1 repetition in reserve, or any range of that. And so a great way to figure out how many repetitions of a certain exercise, right? Whether it's push-ups or, bicep curls or squats. Well, squats, maybe you want to be a little more careful, right? Maybe like a knee extension machine or something like that.
Because you want to be able to walk again tomorrow.
You want to be able to walk again, and you don't want to drop the weights on yourself. So, keeping that in mind.
Safety is always a big factor.
Safety is key. So using machines can be a way to do this, but you can also do this with body weight. You can also do this with dumbbells. Some exercises you can do a lot of before you fatigue, and it just gets really, really uncomfortable towards the end. So that's something like calf raises. Most of us can do a bunch of calf raises before those muscles tire out, and usually just the buildup of metabolites in our muscles gets really comfortable or really uncomfortable. And so anyway, I digress. But going to failure in a couple of different exercises can give us an anchor for, well, how much can I actually do? And so that when we're doing our workouts and it's saying this many reps in reserve, we actually have a realistic idea of where that is versus basing it just on discomfort alone. Like, oh yeah, I'm starting to get tired, I'm starting to get uncomfortable, right? Often the gap between that discomfort where we say we're about done and where our muscles are actually done can be, 3, 4, sometimes even 10 reps. And so what can happen is if our training is too far away from that failure point, we actually end up underloading for the adaptations that we're trying to get.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Well, so I'm victim of this all the time. I think this is something I do a lot. So I have this live to play another day mentality where I would say I probably often shortchange my gains in strength or hypertrophy because I am very much I want to avoid soreness because I like to run and because I like to not be sore. And so I will often, I think, kind of underdo my repetitions. I probably could squeak out a few more, but I'm kind of in this mentality of like live to play another day. I would rather get fewer gains but not be as sore and not be maybe as beat up or risk injury and try to get my improvement more through consistency of effort than like the intensity on any given day. But there's this fine line there of, was it enough to really make your body make a change? And so was it really all that terribly effective? um, I feel like I probably do shortchange myself too often there, um, that I probably could give a little bit more to my workouts.
But I
Anyway.
think that's such a good point, though, of recognizing the balancing act that we're trying to play with, right? How fatigued are we? And then that consistency. Because as we talk about all the time, consistency is the key. And probably more often than we'd all like to admit, we end up overdoing it, right? Like my dad is a great example historically, right? His back would be hurting, he'd get an injection, and then he'd be like, I should probably clean the entire garage today. That would be a really good idea for me. And then ends up not being able to be consistent in moving and exercising because he overloaded it. And so that's definitely something to keep in mind. And so this is like going to failure is not necessary for adaptation. And going to failure every workout definitely is probably not going to be helpful in the long term. What you do as a way to check in every so often to help update your perception of effort and to make it more accurate, it can be a really nice thing. And again, it's not something that you have to do for every muscle every time. Just you do a few different muscle groups and figure out what that feels like. So then you have more accurate data coming in, and your perception is much more closely your perception of effort is much more closely matched with what you actually did, right? With the effort you actually put in. But again, like Cameron said, it is this balancing act. And so again, it's not something that we have to be doing all the time. And so this brings me to another point of this idea of balancing fatigue and effort. You know, our bodies only have so many resources, right, to deal with the different stressors on a day-to-day basis. And stressors are anything that causes that makes our body need more energy for something, right? And there's good stressors, and there's kind of positive stressors, and there's negative stressors, right? So positive stressor, again, would be exercise. It costs our our body energy to go and exercise, but it's making an investment in our future. Really poor sleep costs us resources without making any investment in our future, right? So it's a net negative in terms of stress. And so it's balancing what's kind of releasing the valve on stress, and what's adding to our stress, right? And so again, the going back to this kind of training to failure thing, if we're always fatigued, we're always training to failure. We're oh man, I ran till I couldn't run anymore, and I lifted till I couldn't lift anymore. What's going to happen with that is our risk of injury is going to go way up, and we'll never be able to recover enough to really drive the adaptations that we're looking for. And so there's always the risk of underloading, right? We don't do enough to drive adaptation, right? To get our muscles stronger, to have our heart and lungs work better and more efficiently, right? To become more adapted. But we've brought this issue up before, right? In the context of 80-20 training, of when it ends up being too much high intensity, our body, like we're never refilling the gas tank. And so we actually can't, one, we're not recovering enough, but two, for those days and those times when it needs to be more high intensity, right? Both in cardio type activities and in strength training activities, we don't have enough gas in the tank to do those really high level activities, then we don't end up getting the benefit anyway. And so it kind of ends up being better than had we not done them at all, right? Thoughts on that, Cam?
Yeah, well, I guess my philosophy is just live to play another day, right? And so the more we are always redlining, the more we're always pushing ourselves to failure, the more we're, flirting with that line between, growth and performance improvement and things like that, the more risk we take there, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And part of that, we see a lot of like professional athletes get injuries all the time and stuff. And you wonder like why, when this is their full-time job, why are they getting injured so much? Aren't they doing things to help prevent that? And I'd say a lot of the time they are. The problem is that they are working at a level that they are so close to injury all the time. The difference between a guy that starts a basketball game and the guy that finishes the basketball game and the guy that's been on the bench the whole game is often not skill based. It's often effort based. That they all possess similar skills, and the guy that gets game time is the guy that just pushes harder than everybody else, that plays harder than the other guy. And so it's the person that's always redlining it, always taking it to that edge, runs a big risk. And so when we think of that in our training, or how often are we taking the amount of weight we're lifting to that edge? How often are we taking that, the speed at which we're running and things like that? How often are we riding the edge of our capacity such that our risk increases? Not to say that that's bad to do, and there's a certain amount that we should do, but that 80-20 principle, the idea is that's the optimal range for like getting steady gains and steady improvement while really reducing the risk of injury. So that 80-20, could we get more short-term gains out of doing 70-30 or 60-40 or 50-50 low intensity to high intensity? Absolutely. We could get more short-term gains. The difference is our risk of injury becomes so much greater. Our risk of fatigue and other problems becomes so much greater. And so that's the problem. It's not that you can't see additional improvements from doing more. It's just that the likelihood, if you're going 50-50 high intensity to low intensity, the likelihood that you're going to be doing that in a month from now or 2 months from now is really, really slim. And definitely you're not going to be doing that 2 years from now or 3 years from now. And so that to me is why I say like that live to play another day principle, that mentality is critical, because I would rather err on the side of maybe not getting as much in the way of gains, especially because where I'm at in my life, I'm not trying to be competitive per se in any sport. More, I'm being competitive with myself, and I want to be able to keep performing at a decently, moderate to high level for the rest of my life. And so I would rather err on the side of fewer improvements, fewer gains, and more error on the side of staying safe. So I don't know. That's definitely my bias. and why I think what Mark was talking about really hits home for me. I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm going to share an infographic real quick.
Did
Share my
I
screen.
did I
Yeah.
respond appropriately to what you were
I think
saying?
that's great. Well, no, it actually, so this infographic that I'm going to show is going to demonstrate this idea that Cameron's talking about. Is it better for the recording if I share my screen or, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
definitely
works. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Or you,
So,
yeah. And that way everybody at home can see as well.
okay. So you can see this infographic. And so what it shows is just what Cameron was talking about, right? So on the y-axis, on the y-axis, right, is exercise load, right? How much? So you see at the top, you jump from a 30-foot height, like not going to be great for you. You're going to get injured. And then on the frequency, right, you hiked 10,000 feet of elevation, right? too much frequency, and so an injury. And so what happens is where we want to ride is in between this green line and this yellow line, right? So we're doing enough to improve. And if we go under that on either side, we get into this range that Cameron talked about, right? If we're too close, then we end up redlining and we're just always, one mistake away from injury. Versus if we're in this zone, right, there's quite a bit of buffer room between too much and injury. But the opposite problem, right, if we're doing far too little, then our injury risk actually goes up again because we're not loading our body enough. And so just, again, like Cameron said, staying in this improvement zone is really that idea of living to play another day, right? Doing enough to drive those adaptations, but also allowing plenty of time for recovery. Because as we always say, it's not the training that gets us stronger, right? It's not that. That's not where the adaptations occur. Adaptations actually occur in recovery. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I love that they said at this course is they said, don't tell your body lies about what the future is going to be like. And when we underload and when we overload, we lie to our body about what the future is going to be like, right? So for a lot of the U.S. population, the future that we tell our bodies is like, oh yeah, the future is going to be super easy. It's going to be super chill. Like there's really not much you're going to have to be doing. And so when we come to more challenging things, you see injuries pop up, right? And it's because we're not giving our body an accurate representation of what's going to be like. The only thing that the brain knows is what's coming into it from like the different receptors throughout the body, right? What's coming in through our eyes, what's coming in through our ears, but even internally, right? What messages are our muscles communicating? What messages are our bones communicating to the brain so that it can make decisions about what to do in the future and how to adapt in the future? If we never load it in those ways, then the brain has no idea about what our circumstances are going to look like, what kind of challenges we're going to be going through. And so exercise is a really great way to give our body a good or a better map, at least, of the future, even given all the uncertainty the future holds, right? It's helping us be more accurate in preparing our body for what's going to come, if that makes sense. So I really, really like that idea. Don't lie to your body about what the future is going to look like.
Well, so for me, that speaks to that concept of that I really ascribe to, that I really think is valid and true, is this concept of, how do I want to phrase that? That our body listens to the messages we send it, I guess. That if we tell it, hey, I need you to get stronger, it will listen to that and it will get stronger. It just depends on how we send it that message, right? If we move frequently, if we are, doing things that make it get stronger, it will listen to that message. So it's how we communicate with our body that really matters. And so weightlifting, endurance training, or sedentarism, they communicate with our body, and our body listens to those messages. So if you tell it, I need you to build endurance, and you do consistent endurance training, it will. Vice versa, if I say, I need you to get really good at sitting in this lazy boy recliner, it will. It'll become very efficient at that and waste no calories there whatsoever. Waste no effort or energy on that, and will become very efficient at being inefficient. And so we have to be careful the message that we send it. So if you tell it, I'm going to preferentially, focus on this type of energy system or muscular system, it will preferentially load that, but it will not necessarily keep up the other areas. So if you can deadlift, 1,000,000 pounds and squat several thousand and, all those things, but you can't cut laterally because you don't practice that enough, except for on game day, that's when we see those game day injuries happen, the non-contact ACL tears. You get an NBA player who comes out of college, greatest thing since sliced bread. They tell him, "Hey man, you're great, but you got to put on 30 pounds." And they train their body, but then they stop cutting so much. They spend more time in the gym and less time allowing their body to adapt to those 30 new pounds. And they go out and stress fractures and non-contact ACL tears in rookie athletes, crazy high percentages. The reason why, in my opinion, is the increased intensity of the workout, because they're playing at a much higher level than they were in college, combined with putting on that 15 to 30 pounds, combined with doing now strength training, but in a way that you're doing it very linearly and you're not working all of those kind of accessory movements, and not loading them appropriately with all that new weight that you just put on and the new higher level of intensity of play. And it's a perfect recipe for injury. And we see that in professional athletics all the time. So how does that play into just Wally Weekender that, I just like to go on my, long runs on Saturdays, or I like to go mountain biking on the weekends? Well, the same kind of idea. If I'm not training those systems that I'm going to be using often enough, and then I go out and hit it harder than I'm used to, and I've maybe put on a few pounds, or I've been strength training and lifting heavy weights, but I haven't really been training those systems that I'm going to use in my recreational activities, that puts, a pretty good recipe for disaster out there. So I think that's how we see those lessons that we can learn from professional athletics, and they really do apply to what we're doing in kind of recreational stuff as well.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, one more point, and this we're gonna save one of the points for a later time.
All right.
We're running out of time.
I worry about that. We had a lot of points.
That's good. The one that we're saving it'll be a good discussion. So look forward to that. The last one that I want to talk about, and this relates to what we talked about and what Cameron was just talking about, right? Of risk for injury when we're not including different types of training. And so it's the idea of isolation exercises, right? When and why are we wanting to do those? And so you'll see sometimes people will say like, oh, like a leg extension or a hamstring curl, like those aren't functional, right? Those aren't useful. We don't want to do those. And the problem is that sometimes we need isolation exercises to shore up weaknesses that we're not aware that we have. So there's some really fascinating data that even a year, up to 2 years post someone having an ACL repair, they still don't load their legs the same.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also cases where you can show like equal weight. When you look at the move, it looks pretty normal, but they're actually not engaging their quad muscle on the previously injured side, right? They found a workaround to complete the goal behavior, whether it's running or cutting or squatting, by preferencing and transferring load to different structures.
Mm-hmm.
And so our brains I always tell people that our brains are professional cheating machines. They just want to find the easiest and most efficient way to go from point A to point B. And so sometimes that involves making compensations. And so if we're never like testing anything in isolation, if we're never looking at strength in isolation, then we might miss areas that actually need some work, right? Like maybe we do need some work on our quad. Maybe we need work on one of our hamstrings or on one side of our calves or something on one side of our shoulders. And so occasionally using isolation exercises, one, to kind of test where we're at, but two, to train those muscles in a little bit different way, especially when we're doing it with free weights, where you're not only using the muscles that you're trying to work on, but you're also using muscles around there that are stabilizing the movement. That can be a really great way to shore up some of the weaknesses that we have and make sure that your body's not doing some things to cheat, right? Like, hey, make sure the muscles that are supposed to be working are actually working when we're doing the thing.
Yeah, we see those types of injuries all the time, right? You get somebody that hasn't sprinted or run in a long time and they go to sprint and they pull a hamstring. And it's because so much of what we do in the gym and so much of what we do activities-wise is very quad dominant. And so the balance between our hamstrings and our quads is typically off, where our hamstrings aren't as strong. So strengthening hamstrings in isolation can be really, really important to balance out that amount of strength to some degree, so that when we do have kind of a goofy movement, when we have to correct, that unbalanced loading of the hamstring doesn't cause us to pull a hammy. We've all been there, we've all done that, and it's never fun. So hamstring strains are really not fun. And so just balancing that out in that way can really help. And so there's definitely a time and a place for an isolation strengthening exercise. Isolation,
that's a new one.
yes, an isolation exercise.
And that just goes to the point of like giving our body a lot of different messages in different ways so that we're kind of strong as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. So we don't move in just one plane, right? We move in diagonals and side to side and front to back and rotating. And so including some exercises that isolate those different planes and make sure that we're getting that within our workout can be really helpful, right? We still want our main movements, right? Compound movements that are similar to the things that we're doing in a day, right? The reason we love squats is because like multiple times a day, we're going in and out of chairs, right? Like we're trying to do the movements that involve a lot of muscle groups and that are similar to the ways that we move, but also just including some of those isolation exercises, including some of those exercises in different planes and in rotation, again, is going to help us be more robust and shore up the areas that a lot of people's training programs miss because they only do movements in certain ways.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. I think that having that, just that balance and balancing out our fitness in those ways, long term is the key. Again, it's all about living to play another day. So balancing out our exercise effort, intensity, balancing out, what exercises we focus on and when. It's life is all about balance. But there's a lot of truth to that, right? Of just finding that happy medium where we can grow. And what they found is that 80-20 principle really does seem to bear out in most things in life. So we're definitely big 80-20 proponents and would definitely say follow that as much as you can. All right. Well, we've used up our time. Hopefully that was a helpful message for everyone. And yeah, glad we were able to have a bunch of you on tonight, and look forward to seeing you on the call on Thursday. We've got Thanksgiving coming up next week. We will not be doing a Thursday Thanksgiving call, especially since our Thursday call is right in the middle of the day. I don't think we'd have many people joining. So we'll take next Thursday off, but we'll still be there Monday, Tuesday. So looking forward to seeing you all on the calls next week and this coming Thursday. We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Becoming Body Smart podcast. If you have questions, thoughts, or want to continue the conversation, reach out to us on our socials or join our community. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps us bring you even more valuable content. Remember, sustainable health is a lifelong journey, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Live longer, live stronger, and become body smart.